In the previous two videos, we established that our existing form of money performs three primary functions. It serves as a medium of exchange, which allows the division of labor to expand beyond what would be possible using barter. It functions as a unit of account, which provides a standard measure which can be used to compare the values of all the different goods and services which make up an economy. And it also serves as a store of value, which enables people to save and addresses the problem that the time frames of consumption and production often don't coincide. Each of these three functions is important. However, we should also note that it's not necessary that all three functions should be combined in one instrument. And this is the crux of Silvio Gesell's criticism of our existing form of money. He realized that there's a fundamental contradiction involved in asking one instrument to function both as a medium of exchange and as a store of value. In fact, Gesell argued that it's impossible for one instrument to serve both functions effectively. We need to explore this contradiction in depth because this is the key point upon which Gesell's criticisms of our entire monetary system are based. Gesell attributes many of the problems which have plagued monetary economies since ancient times to the inherent contradiction between money's functions as a medium of exchange and a store of value. In future videos, we'll explore how this contradiction in the nature of money causes a whole host of problems throughout the economic system. But first, we need to examine the nature of the contradiction itself. So, first, let's make some observations about the fundamentally different natures of a medium of exchange and a store of value. For starters, a medium of exchange only performs its function when it's in motion. Money only facilitates exchange when it's changing hands, whereas money only serves as a store of value when it's not in motion. Money as a vehicle for saving only performs that function when it's standing still. So the character of money when it serves these two functions is exactly opposite. Asking money to serve as both a medium of exchange and a store of value simultaneously is asking it to move and be stationary at the same time. It's a logical impossibility. So let's look a little closer at this inherent contradiction in the nature of money and explore how the fact that money can be used as a store of value prevents it from fulfilling its function as a medium of exchange. In order to make this point clear, let's start with an observation we made in the previous video, specifically the fact that the vast majority of real goods and services lose value with the passage of time. Food spoils, metal rusts, equipment breaks, heat, cold, moisture, lack of moisture, insects, mold, all attack matter and cause it to degrade. Therefore, it's the nature of almost all goods and services that they must be sold sooner rather than later, and failure to sell them leads to economic losses for those who produce them. If a producer of milk and a producer of meat come together to negotiate an exchange, they'll both suffer loss if they fail to reach an agreement. Another way of saying the same thing is that real goods and services are not hoardable. They cannot be stored without causing economic losses to their holders. They must be offered for sale, even if they're sold at a loss, because the longer their holders wait to sell them, the larger will be the losses caused by holding them. But money, in its capacity as a store of value, is expressly designed to be hoarded. Saving is hoarding. But we just observed that the vast majority of real goods and services which make up the economy are not hoardable. So what does it mean for money in its capacity as a medium of exchange that it can be hoarded while the goods and services it is used to exchange cannot? We previously observed that barter is essentially fair because pressure to transact applies on both sides of every negotiation. But now imagine that we could selectively repeal the laws of nature and decided to exempt one side of every barter transaction from the nearly universal tendency of goods and services to lose value over time. What would happen to our negotiation between a producer of meat and a producer of eggs if the meat producer knew that his meat would never go bad? Obviously, this would give an enormous advantage to the meat producer. Not only could he walk away from the negotiation without making a deal, knowing that his merchandise would remain intact, but he would also know that the person he's negotiating with doesn't have the same luxury. He would be able to use this leverage to dictate the terms of exchange, and the egg producer would have no choice but to accept whatever terms were being offered. And this is essentially what happens when we use a hoardable form of money as a medium of exchange. The holders of money are granted a massive advantage over the producers of real goods and services who they negotiate with. Gesell describes this dynamic in his book, The Natural Economic Order. Here's how he describes the interaction between holders of hoardable money and producers of real goods and services. The possessor of money holds demand like a hound on the leash and lets it slip at the quarry of his choice. Wares are the quarry of demand. Demand enters the market proudly confident of an easy victory. Supply appears dejected like a beggar who expects more kicks than halfpence. On the one hand, compulsion. On the other hand, freedom. And the two together, compulsion and freedom, determine price. And to repeat, this unfair situation is caused by the fact that we have deliberately adopted a form of money that is immune to the forces which apply to almost all real goods and services. Throughout most of human history, we've used gold, one of the only substances on Earth that is immune to the passage of time, as money. And we did that because we wanted money to serve as a store of value. However, what we failed to consider is how gold's hoardability affects its performance as a medium of exchange. In his book, Gesell says that commerce is mathematically impossible with falling prices. This statement is a key clue to understanding why a hoardable form of money will inevitably fail to perform its function as a medium of exchange. Imagine that you held a quantity of gold money and were contemplating making a purchase. Now someone comes up to you and tells you that the price of the item you're thinking about buying will be lowered tomorrow. What would you do? Obviously, you would postpone your purchase, since tomorrow you'll be able to buy the same product for less money. And here we have the key to understanding the tendency of monetary economies to periodically seize up and collapse. Anytime there's a general expectation of falling prices, holders of money have an incentive to postpone their purchases as much as possible. And the hoardable nature of their money allows them to do so without suffering any loss. But real goods and services must be sold no matter what. The longer their holders wait to sell, the larger will be their losses. So the expectation of falling prices causes demand to shrink relative to supply. Thus, the expectation becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. The belief that prices will fall causes demand to withdraw, and the withdrawal of demand causes prices to fall. And on top of this, the supply of unsold goods and services piles up and adds to the imbalance between supply and demand, causing prices to fall even more. This is a textbook description of what happens during a commercial crisis. And to repeat, the reason why this dynamic takes place is because of the hoardable nature of money. Let's imagine for a moment that instead of gold, we had chosen to use corn as money. If corn was used as money, this problem of the imbalance between supply and demand wouldn't exist, because corn degrades just like the goods and services it would be used to exchange. Therefore, negotiations between producers of goods and services and holders of corn money would take place on a level playing field, just as they do in barter. The problem is that corn is not a good store of value. It rots, it gets attacked by moisture, mold, and insects. However, if we're concerned exclusively with money's function as a medium of exchange, corn would be a much better choice than gold for the money material. The criteria by which we judge the performance of a medium of exchange is the ease and consistency with which it facilitates exchange. From this point of view, gold is one of the worst possible choices. Because it's not subject to the compulsion to circulate, which affects 99% of the goods and services which make up the economy, it's less reliable in terms of accomplishing exchange. Remember, one of the primary factors that motivates exchange is that both sides suffer economic loss if they fail to reach an agreement. But if we choose a monetary medium which exempts one side of every transaction from this pressure, not only do we inject an element of unfairness into every negotiation, but we also make it less likely that exchange will take place. So from this perspective, corn would be a far more effective medium of exchange than gold. If we had set out to create the best possible medium of exchange, gold is the last material we would have chosen. Gold was chosen as the money material due to its merits as a store of value. But, as we just discussed, this is putting the cart before the horse. If money was subject to decay and lost value over time, like goods and services do, it would continue to circulate regardless of whether prices were rising, falling, or staying the same. But because money is exempt from this pressure, it stops circulating precisely at the time when society most needs it to do so. And the reason why this happens is because money was designed to be used as a store of value. So if we're forced to choose between these two functions, if money can only serve one of them, which one should we choose? Which is more important? We've already established that money's function as a medium of exchange is a matter of life and death. If our medium of exchange were to suddenly disappear, thus preventing the division of labor from continuing to function, most of the people currently living on Earth would die. On the other hand, what would be the consequences if money could no longer be used to store wealth? Would anyone die as a result? Probably not. The functioning of the division of labor, which is the engine that creates all the goods and services we need to live, does not depend on money functioning as a store of value. In fact, nature provides us with many ways to store value. People who wish to store wealth can do so using gold, silver, precious stones, oil, livestock, agricultural products, etc. But nature does not provide us with a medium of exchange. By combining the function of medium of exchange with that of store of value, we fundamentally altered the essentially fair nature of barter. Instead of designing a neutral medium of exchange which preserves the level playing field upon which barter transactions take place, we instead chose a non-neutral medium to use as money. And this injects an element of unfairness into virtually every economic exchange that is intermediated by money. From this fundamental defect, we'll be able to explain many, if not most, of the big picture problems that have plagued economic systems since the invention of money. From poverty to economic inequality to periodic stagnation and collapse, all of these chronic problems, which seem to be inevitable aspects of every economic system throughout history, stem from the non-neutral nature of money, which is a consequence of our irrational decision to combine our medium of exchange with a store of value. In future videos, we'll examine a variety of these specific problems and explain how they can be traced back to the nature of our flawed form of money. Thanks for watching.